My name is Arthur Bledsoe. I turned 78 last January, though some mornings I wake up and feel as though I'm well over 100. The joints creak louder, the hands shake a little more than yesterday. And the mirror doesn't lie. I live alone in a modest, single-story brick house on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio, the same house I bought with my late wife Marjorie back in 1972. It's quiet here. The birds still come to the feeder I hung on the maple outside, and the mail still arrives at exactly 2:15 p.m., as it has for the last 10 years. I suppose that's what I cling to most these days, the things that haven't changed. I taught high school English for 41 years. I retired the year I turned 65, not because I wanted to, but because the board practically begged me to step down after a new wave of educational reform came through. I didn't fit the mold anymore, too opinionated, too traditional. But I loved those kids, even when they rolled their eyes or slept through Shakespeare. I always believed teaching was more than curriculum. It was about shaping people, showing them that their thoughts mattered. Sometimes, when I walk past the bookshelves in my living room, I'll pause at the old editions of To Kill a Mockingbird or Of Mice and Men, and my fingers will trace the worn spines like they're relics from a different lifetime. My wife Marjorie passed 11 years ago. Cancer. Pancreatic. 6 months from diagnosis to silence. She died in the very bed I still sleep in. Her last words a soft, "I'm sorry." Though for what, I'll never know. We didn't have a perfect marriage, who does? But we had trust, routine, and the kind of bond that doesn't need fireworks to feel sacred. I still talk to her sometimes, especially on Sundays when the sun hits the living room carpet just right and the house smells like dust and yesterday's coffee. I still keep her robe hanging on the bathroom door. I know it's strange. I know it's long past the point of letting go. But the truth is, I don't want to let go. If I do, I'm not sure what's left of me. We had one child, our son, Franklin. He was never the warm type. Even as a boy, he kept to himself. Books, computers, chess. He went off to the University of Michigan and never really came back, not in the way that mattered. He lives in Atlanta now, works for some tech company I can never remember the name of. Married late, had one child, Savannah. My granddaughter. The only person in the family who ever really made me feel like I still had a place in this world. Savannah was the light of my life. When she was little, she used to spend summers with Marjorie and me. Bike rides through the neighborhood, pancake breakfasts with extra whipped cream, trips to the park where she'd run ahead and turn back every few feet just to make sure I was still, watching. I was always watching. Every ballet recital, every spelling bee, every birthday card signed with glitter and hearts, I saved them all. There's a shoebox in my closet filled with her old drawings and notes, one of them scrawled in shaky blue marker. "Grandpa, you're my favorite person." When she got older, things started to shift. It happens, I suppose. Adolescence pulls children away like the tide. But even as her visits became shorter, even as her phone calls grew less frequent, I kept hope. When she got accepted to Northwestern, I cried. I actually sat at the kitchen table and cried into my hands. No one else in our family had ever gone to a school like that. Franklin barely acknowledged it, said it was too expensive. But I had money saved. Decades of careful saving, frugality, and that old Midwestern belief that you don't spend unless you must. I paid for her tuition without blinking. Never told her how much. Never asked for a thank you. I just wanted her to have every opportunity, every freedom that life had denied me in my own youth. After Marjorie died, I poured myself into helping Savannah. I sent her care packages, grocery money, holiday cards with checks tucked discreetly inside. Sometimes she'd reply, mostly by text. Other times, silence. But I didn't complain. I figured college life was hectic, and I didn't want to be the nagging grandfather. I still remember the last time she visited the house before graduation. Christmas, 3 years ago. She brought a boyfriend, some slick-haired boy named Jace who called me sir, like it was a joke. They stayed for 2 hours, drank my wine, ate Marjorie's old gingerbread recipe, and left early because of a party downtown. I watched their car pull out of the driveway and sat alone at the dining table, wondering if I'd see her again before spring. It's funny. I've spent so many hours, so many days trying to understand what went wrong, where the warmth went, where the softness disappeared. Savannah used to hug me like she meant it. Used to ask for bedtime stories even when she was far too old for them. Used to hold my hand on walks, say things like, "Don't die, Grandpa," with the earnestness only children can muster. And now, the calls are cold, the tone clipped, the visits non-existent. Still, I never stopped hoping. That's the cruel thing about love. Even when it's been stretched, trampled, left to rot in silence, it lingers. It clings. It waits for resurrection. Every time the phone rang, I looked at the screen hoping it was her. Every knock at the door brought a flicker of impossible hope. And so, when she did call last month, out of the blue, after almost a year, I answered before the second ring, heart hammering like a schoolboy's. She said she wanted to visit. Said she and Jace were passing through. Said they wanted to catch up. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. Washed the curtains, bought new sheets for the guest bed. I even baked Marjorie's apple pie recipe, though the crust came out a bit too thick. I shaved, put on a fresh cardigan, set the table with the old china we hadn't used since 2005. I thought, naively perhaps, that this was the beginning of something new, a reconnection, a return. I told myself that whatever had come between us could be mended, that she was still the little girl with glitter glue on her fingers, still my granddaughter who once cried when I missed a school play because I had the flu. I had no idea, not the faintest inkling, that this visit would be the end of something, that the girl who once kissed my forehead and whispered, "I love you forever," would be the same one to raise her hand against me. That she would stand in my kitchen, our kitchen, and call me useless, spit those words like venom from a mouth I once taught to sing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That part comes later. For now, let me tell you how it began. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Savannah and Jace arrived. I remember because I'd circled the date on the wall calendar in red marker and spent the entire morning pacing between the window and the clock. At precisely 2:08 p.m., a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the driveway. I stood up too quickly from my chair and had to steady myself before making it to the door. Savannah emerged first. She wore dark jeans, a crisp white blouse, and those oversized sunglasses that cover half the face. Her hair was tied back in a severe ponytail, not the loose curls I remembered from her younger days. Jace stepped out next, tall, lean, tan in a way that felt more artificial than natural. He had that effortless swagger, the kind that says, "I've never had to work for anything in my life." I opened the door before they even knocked. "Grandpa," Savannah said, offering a quick half-smile, the kind you give to a stranger on the street. "Hey there," I said, my voice already catching with emotion. I moved in for a hug, and she allowed it, though her arms barely wrapped around me. Jace stood behind her, fiddling with his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. Come in," I said, stepping aside. They walked in like real estate agents evaluating a property, eyes scanning, feet slow and deliberate. I had cleaned everything top to bottom, but I suddenly felt embarrassed. The house looked small, old, too quiet. "Wow," Jace muttered, "this place is vintage." Savannah giggled, but it wasn't a sweet sound, it was dismissive. I tried to keep the mood light. "You must be hungry after the drive," I said, gesturing toward the dining room. "I made lunch, chicken salad sandwiches just like you used to like, Savannah, and apple pie." She glanced at the table, then at Jace, then back at me. "We actually grabbed something on the way, but thanks." My smile faltered. "Oh," I said. "Well, we can still sit. Catch up." They followed me into the dining room where I had set everything. China plates, cloth napkins, even the crystal glasses that hadn't seen the light of day since Marjorie passed. Jace didn't sit. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, looking vaguely amused. Savannah sat, but kept her phone in her hand, scrolling as I tried to start conversation. "So, how's work?" I asked, folding my napkin nervously. "Still at that branding agency?" She glanced up. "No, I left that 6 months ago. Jace and I are starting something new now. Real estate investments." Jace perked up slightly at that, like a trained dog hearing the word walk. "Yeah," he said. "We're getting into property development, Airbnb flips. You'd be surprised how much money you can make off a 3-bedroom with a decent kitchen and modern floors." I nodded slowly, not entirely understanding, but trying to stay engaged. "Well, good for you. Sounds exciting." "It is," Savannah said flatly, "and stressful." The conversation stalled. I sipped my water, looked at the pie untouched. "So," I said, trying again, "what brings you here after all this time?" Savannah looked at Jace, then back at me. She placed her phone down, folded her hands. The air shifted. "Actually, Grandpa," she began, her tone suddenly careful, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." I felt my stomach tighten. "Of course," I said. "Anything." "Well," she continued, "we've been looking at a few investment opportunities. There's this amazing deal right now, a 4-unit building downtown, great ROI, but we're short on capital for the down payment." "Okay," I said, confused. "I'm not sure how I can help with that." Jace stepped forward now, finally part of the conversation. "Your house," he said plainly. "It's paid off, right?" I blinked. "Yes, I paid off the mortgage years ago." Savannah leaned in. "See, if you transfer the deed to me, just on paper, it boosts our creditworthiness, helps us qualify for a bigger loan. You wouldn't have to move or anything. It's just for paperwork. And maybe in a few years when we cash out, we'll even put your name on something new, bigger." I stared at her. "You want me to transfer the house?" "Just temporarily," she said, her voice syrupy. "It's all legal. Jace's lawyer already looked into it." "No," I said softly. "No, Savannah. I'm sorry, but I can't do that." Something shifted in her face. Disappointment, irritation, maybe something darker. "Grandpa, it's just a formality," she insisted. "You're not even using the full space. You live alone in a 3-bedroom house. We're trying to build a future here. You always said you wanted me to have opportunities." "I did," I said, "and I gave you one." "I paid for college, remember?" "That's not the point," she snapped. "That money's gone. This is about now, about real life, about investing in something that matters." I looked at her then. Not just looked, but really saw her. The glossed lips, the expensive watch, the practiced tone of entitlement. This wasn't my Savannah, or maybe it was, and I just hadn't noticed her changing. "I'm sorry," I repeated, "but I'm not putting my house in anyone's name but mine." Jace scoffed. "Well, that's selfish." I turned to him. "I don't recall asking your opinion." He raised his eyebrows, clearly not used to being challenged. Savannah stood up suddenly. "You know what? This was a mistake." She walked to the door, grabbed her purse. "I thought you'd want to help. I thought you cared about my future, but clearly you're just stuck. Useless." The word hit like a slap even before the actual slap came. She turned back, her eyes glassy with frustration, and slapped me. Open-palmed, quick and sharp across the cheek. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to humiliate. Hard enough to leave something deeper than pain. Jace didn't even flinch. I stumbled back a step, stunned. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She just looked at me like I was an obstacle. "We'll figure it out ourselves," she said coldly. "Don't worry, we don't need you." and with that, they left. The door slammed behind them like a final sentence in a cruel letter. I stood there for a long time, hand on my cheek, heart pounding in my ears, the smell of untouched apple pie thick in the air. The hours after they left bled together into a haze of confusion, disbelief, and a mounting sense of something I hadn't felt in years: humiliation. I wandered through the house as if I were a ghost, retracing the steps we had taken just moments earlier. The untouched plates, the still warm pie, the guest bed I had prepared so carefully with fresh linens and lavender sachets tucked beneath the pillows. I kept playing the moment over and over again in my head, her tone, her words, the weightless, indifferent way her hand had met my face. Not in rage, not in grief, not even in passion, just irritation, like swatting a fly. I sat down in the old recliner by the window, the one with the springs that creaked just so when you leaned back too far, and stared at the driveway. Part of me expected them to return, to come storming back through the door with apologies or explanations. But the minutes turned to hours, and only the birds returned, pecking quietly at the feeder outside. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its rhythmic click. My cheek still stung faintly, not from the force of her slap, but from the sheer absurdity of it. I thought about Marjorie. What would she have said? She always had a sharp instinct about people, even when I didn't. I remembered her once saying, during one of Savannah's teenage years, "Arthur, she's learning from Franklin how to disappear into her own needs." At the time, I'd brushed it off as pessimism, but now I wondered if she'd seen something I had refused to see. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the shoebox from the closet, the one filled with Savannah's drawings, cards, and childhood photos. I sat on the living room floor, legs crossed like a child, and leafed through the past. Crayon hearts, spelling bee certificates, a photo of her on my shoulders at the county fair, grinning with cotton candy stuck to her cheek. I wanted to throw it all away, but I couldn't. Not yet. Later that week, I received a voicemail from Savannah. Her voice was clipped, efficient. "Grandpa, sorry about the other day. Things got heated. Anyway, Jace and I talked to a financial planner, and we still think the deed transfer would be the smartest move for everyone. Let me know." There was no apology in the tone, no remorse, just logistics, as if nothing had happened. I didn't call back. The next day, she texted, "You're being stubborn. We're offering you a chance to help your family. Don't make us go around you." That phrase stuck with me. Go around you. What did it mean? Go around how? I spoke with my banker, a kind woman named Ellen who'd handled my accounts for years. I asked her to monitor any unusual activity and to notify me immediately if anything looked suspicious. Then I went to my lawyer, Mr. Raymond Dwyer, and asked him to review the deed and the will I'd written shortly after Marjorie's death. "You sure everything's okay?" he asked, peering at me over his glasses. I nodded, slowly. "Not yet, but I intend to make it so." That night I had another dream about Savannah, but she was little again, maybe 6 or 7, sitting at the kitchen table drawing a picture of a house with the words, "Me and Grandpa's home," written at the top. When I woke up, I wept. Not for the slap, not for the insult, but for the death of that version of her. She was gone. The following weekend I received a knock at the door. I opened it to find Savannah standing there alone. No Jace, her arms folded, her mouth pressed into a hard line. "Can I come in?" she asked, though she didn't wait for a response. I stepped aside. She walked in with that same air of confident entitlement, surveying the house like she was inspecting it again, this time with cooler intent. "I wanted to give you another chance," she said, spinning around to face me. "I don't know what you're holding on to, Grandpa, but this house, it's not doing you any good. It's old. You're old. And frankly, it's just sitting here rotting while people like Jace and I are trying to build something." You think you're protecting something, but you're not. You're just being selfish. I remained calm. This house is paid for, Savannah. It's mine. I raised my family here. I buried my wife from here. Every corner has meaning. That's not selfish. That's called memory. That's called roots. Roots don't pay dividends, she snapped. Jace, I interrupted. Why do you keep saying his name first? Why are his goals suddenly yours? Does he love you, Savannah? Or does he just see what you can get for him? Her eyes narrowed. That's rich, coming from a man who never supported my dreams. I paid for 4 years of college, I said quietly, without ever asking for thanks. Because you wanted control, she said. You think I don't see that? The money, the gifts, they were strings. Well, I'm cutting them. Then she pulled out a folder from her oversized bag and laid it on the dining table. This is the paperwork. Just sign. If you really loved me, you would. I stared at the folder. If you really loved me, I said, you wouldn't have to ask. There was silence, long and dense. Then she muttered, Fine, grabbed the folder and stormed out. I thought that might be the end of it. I hoped, foolishly, that it was. But it wasn't. 2 days later, I received a letter, official, typed and co-signed by Jace's attorney, requesting a voluntary reassignment of property to next of kin, due to senior incapacitation risk. The wording was vague, ominous, and intentionally intimidating. I called Mr. Dwyer again. He read the letter twice, then looked up at me slowly. They're preparing to challenge your capacity, he said. They're going to try and make a case that you're not mentally fit to manage your own estate. If they succeed, the court could appoint a conservator. And guess who that would be? Savannah, Jace. The realization was like a cold hand closing around my throat. They weren't just trying to get the house. They were trying to erase me. I left the office with trembling hands, drove straight home, and sat at the kitchen table where I'd once helped Savannah with her multiplication homework. I looked around at the walls, the photographs, the dusty china cabinet, the worn arms of Marjorie's old chair, and I knew that they were not going to take this from me. Not while I could still fight. I picked up the phone and made another call, not to the lawyer, not to the bank, but to a real estate broker. It was time to make the first move. It was on a Thursday morning, one of those still gray Ohio days where the sky hangs low like a lid and everything feels slower than it should, that I decided I could no longer wait for them to make the next move. I had spent nearly a week consumed by the thought that Savannah and Jace might actually succeed in making a legal case for my incompetence, might actually wrestle away not just my home, but my autonomy, my dignity, my very place in this world. The more I thought about it, the more clearly I understood that they were not operating on impulse or youthful arrogance. They were executing a plan. Carefully, methodically. The folder she had left on my dining table wasn't just a provocation, it was a declaration. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about control. And I wasn't about to surrender quietly. I went through the documents Savannah had left behind, the ones she had wanted me to sign before our final confrontation. I hadn't looked at them before, out of anger, out of grief, I suppose, but now I sat with them for hours, glasses perched low on my nose, pen in hand as if I were grading a final exam. The language was slick, full of conditional phrasing and vague assurances. Temporary transfer of ownership for financial facilitation. No alteration to current occupancy. Reviewable in the event of primary party's incapacity or death. The last clause chilled me. The document didn't just plan for the future, it anticipated my end as a step in their blueprint. I called Mr. Dwyer again and asked him a question I had been turning over in my mind for days. What if, I said, what if I liquidated my position altogether? He paused. You mean sell the house? Yes, I said, preemptively, before they can do anything. There was a long silence. That's Drastic, Arthur. This is your home. Are you sure? I wasn't. But what I did know was that if I sat still, if I clung too tightly to the past, I might wake up one day in a nursing facility that Savannah had chosen for me, wondering how I got there. I just need to know my options, I said. I need to know I have the power to act, not just react. That afternoon, I met with a real estate agent named Linda Tran. She was a wiry woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, the kind of person who could tell you how much your house was worth before she stepped through the door. We sat at my kitchen table and I told her everything, maybe more than I should have. She didn't flinch. When I finished, she folded her hands and said, "Let me be clear, Mr. Bledsoe. You own this home outright. Your name is on the title. Unless a judge declares otherwise, no one, not your granddaughter, not a lawyer, not even the governor, can take it from you. Even if they claim I'm unfit. They can claim anything. Doesn't make it true. You're here. You're speaking. You're making decisions. That's more than half the battle." Over the next few days, I quietly began the process of listing the house. Not publicly, not yet, but laying the groundwork. Linda brought in an appraiser, and I found myself cleaning and staging, moving through the rooms like a man preparing for departure. Every item I packed was a memory I had to examine. The photograph of Marjorie and me in front of the Grand Canyon, the old tin box of letters she had written me when we were first married, the handmade quilt Savannah had once gifted me. Stitched, unevenly but with love, or at least what I thought was love. I boxed it all with a mixture of sorrow and determination. And then, late one evening, something unexpected happened. I received a message, handwritten, slid under my door in an envelope with no return address. It was from Savannah. The handwriting was unmistakable, still the same loopy script she had used as a child. "Grandpa," it read, "I know you're upset. I'm sorry about the slap. I don't know what came over me. Jay says we pushed too hard, and maybe we did. But we're under a lot of pressure right now, and I just wanted to believe that you'd still be there for me like you always were. Please call me. I miss you." I read it once, then twice. Something inside me stirred. Nostalgia, doubt, even a flicker of longing. But beneath it all was the awareness that this was not just an apology. It was a tactic, a recalibration. She knew she had gone too far and was trying to pull me back in. The timing was too perfect, too strategic. The very next morning, I learned from Ellen at the bank that someone had tried to access my retirement account. The request had come through an online portal, using partial credentials and a phone number that didn't belong to me. "We flagged it immediately," she said. "Don't worry, no money was moved, but I thought you should know." My heart sank. I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. That night I sat down at my desk with a legal pad and a pen, and I began to write a new will. I named no family members. I left everything, house, accounts, belongings, to a local scholarship fund for underserved students. Students who, unlike Savannah, might see education as a gift rather than a transaction. I called Mr. Dwyer the next day and had it notarized. I had reached the midpoint of a war I never asked for, and there would be no going back. The lines were drawn. Savannah had come to my door not to reconcile, but to infiltrate. Jace wasn't just a bad influence, he was a parasite. And I, an old man with a fading voice and a heart full of the past, would have to become something I had never quite learned to be. Ruthless. The next 2 weeks passed in uneasy silence, the kind that settles not because there is peace, but because the air has grown too dense with unspoken war to carry sound. I avoided my phone. I unplugged the landline. The only calls I took were from Linda, who was in the process of preparing a quiet, private sale of my house, and Mr. Dwyer, who had submitted my updated will and power of attorney documents to the courthouse. Every time I passed the hallway mirror, I studied my reflection for signs of fragility, trying to see myself as they might see me. Vulnerable, malleable, weak enough to manipulate. But what stared back was not a frail old man. It was someone weathered, yes, lined by years and softened by grief, but still sharp, still aware, still fully capable of knowing betrayal when he saw it and resisting it when it came. Then the letter arrived. Not a letter, in fact, but a formal petition, delivered by courier and bearing the seal of Franklin County Court. Savannah and Jace had filed a motion to begin conservatorship proceedings against me, claiming that I was no longer mentally or physically competent to manage my own affairs. The language in the filing was precise, carefully worded, designed not to seem cruel, but concerned. It cited memory lapses, confused financial behavior, and evidence of cognitive decline. It listed my age, recent health appointments, and even quoted lines from the voicemail Savannah had left me, selectively edited, to suggest that I had grown erratic and paranoid. The supporting affidavit was signed by a doctor I had never heard of, a man who, according to the fine print, had reviewed observed behavioral patterns and available records. There had been no exam, no consultation, no permission. I took the letter straight to Mr. Dwyer. He read it with a practiced calm that only barely masked his disgust. "This is aggressive," he said. "They're not trying to ease into this. They want full control, and quickly." I nodded, saying nothing. "Luckily," he continued, "they've jumped the gun. You've already undergone a full medical examination just 2 months ago. I'll contact Dr. Lanning for a competency affidavit. He's respected, thorough. His word will carry weight." "And if that's not enough," I asked. "Then we go to court," he said. "We make them stand in front of a judge and look you in the eye. That'll be their mistake." The night after that meeting, I couldn't sleep again, so I went to the garage and sat in my old work chair among the smell of sawdust and oil. I stared at the shelves of tools I no longer used and thought about all the things I had once built. Furniture, bookcases, birdhouses for Savannah when she was young. I used to believe that building something with your hands could anchor you to this world, that permanence could be created out of wood and nails. But what had it gotten me? A daughter who had stopped calling after Marjorie died. A granddaughter who had once traced hearts into the frost on the window, but now filed legal documents to declare me incompetent. A garage full of quiet ruins. Savannah showed up again 3 days later, this time unannounced. I heard the car before I saw her. The same black SUV, tires crunching over the gravel. She didn't knock. She opened the door and stepped inside like she still had a right. "You didn't respond to the petition," she said flatly. "I did," I replied without getting up. "My attorney filed a motion to contest. I'm undergoing an independent exam." She rolled her eyes. "Grandpa, this is getting out of hand. Why are you being so difficult? We're just trying to help you." "By stealing from me?" I asked. "By declaring me insane?" "You're not thinking clearly," she said, voice rising. "You're letting your paranoia make choices for you. Jace and I, we're not the enemy. We're your family." I stared at her. "If you were my family, you wouldn't need a judge to make decisions on my behalf. You'd talk to me. You'd sit at my table like a granddaughter, not a lawyer." Her face shifted then from indignation to something closer to contempt. "You know what? Maybe it's time we stopped pretending you've ever been there for me. You threw money at me, sure, paid for college, but where were you when I needed real advice? When I was drowning in student stress and depression? When Mom and Dad were fighting constantly, and I needed someone to talk to who wasn't just pushing books or memories?" I sat there, stunned, because the truth of what she was saying rang louder than I expected. I hadn't known she was struggling. I hadn't seen beyond the thank you texts and occasional selfies she sent from campus. I thought I was doing enough. I thought paying her tuition, sending packages, being quiet when she needed space, that all counted as love. And maybe it did, but maybe it wasn't what she needed. Still, None of it justified what she was doing now. "You never told me," I said finally. "You never asked," she replied, her voice sharp. Then she turned and walked out, leaving the door ajar behind her. That night I found myself poring over old photos again, looking for signs of when things had shifted. When did the sweet girl with braids become the woman in designer sunglasses who spoke to me like I was a stranger? Had it started with her father, Franklin, who had always treated me with a mixture of indifference and latent resentment? Or had it started with me, when I chose to love her from a distance rather than crowd her too close? I didn't know. But the question circled endlessly, pecking at the edges of my resolve. The court hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Mr. Dwyer coached me on what to say, how to remain composed. Dr. Lanning had already submitted his written evaluation, lucid, coherent, fully competent. I rehearsed my statement at night, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, pretending the toothbrush was a microphone. I may be 78, but I pay my bills, I manage my accounts, I drive when I must. I am not a man losing his grip. I am a man trying to protect what little I have left from the very people who should have been guarding it with me. When Monday arrived, I put on the same navy suit I had worn to Marjorie's funeral. It no longer fit as snugly as it once had, but it would do. In the courtroom, Savannah sat beside Jace, both dressed impeccably, looking every inch the concerned caretakers. When the judge asked them to speak, they did so in tones of perfect empathy. "We love Arthur," Savannah said, her voice wavering just enough. "This isn't about money, it's about safety. He's alone, he's vulnerable, he forgets things. We're just trying to make sure he's protected." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I waited for my turn, then stood and delivered my statement exactly as I had rehearsed it. Steady, articulate, deliberate. I looked the judge in the eye. I didn't stammer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let them see the grief churning underneath. By the end of the hearing, it was clear the judge had made up his mind. "The court sees no compelling evidence that Mr. Arthur Bledsoe is incapable of managing his personal affairs," he declared. "The petition for conservatorship is denied." I sat down slowly, feeling like I had run a marathon with weights on my chest. Savannah and Jace didn't even look at me as they left the courtroom. But I saw Jace lean in and say something sharp in her ear, and I saw the way she stiffened, jaw clenched, mask slipping. Later that night, I returned home to find that someone had slashed the tires on my car. It was the final escalation. Not legal, not verbal, but physical. A threat, or perhaps a tantrum. Either way, it was proof. The war was no longer about just the house or the money. It was personal now, and it would only get worse. In the days following the court hearing, I did not celebrate. There was no victory dinner, no phone calls to friends, no moment of jubilant reflection. Instead, I moved through the house like a man counting the days before an ending. I had won, yes, but what I had preserved was a fortress now, a shell, something that stood but no longer sheltered. The house still smelled of old wood and lemon polish. The light still filtered through the curtains in the late afternoon, just as it had when Marjorie would hum to herself while folding laundry. But the warmth had gone. What remained was knowledge, sharp, sobering knowledge, that my granddaughter, the same girl whose tiny fingers had once held mine on the way to the grocery store, had tried to strip me of everything I had left. I kept the slashed tires as they were for a few days, almost as a kind of monument. Neighbors asked about it, and I said nothing. Let the silence speak. But one morning, I woke up and saw a note tucked under the windshield wiper. It was handwritten, no name. "You should have signed the papers. This isn't over." That was when I knew. This was no longer a slow, familial drift. This was war waged by inheritance. And so, I escalated my plan. I called Linda and told her to move forward with the listing, publicly this time. I no longer cared if Savannah found out. In fact, I wanted her to. The house, my house, would be sold. Not passed down, not bequeathed, not saved in some fantasy of reconciliation. I would not bequeath ashes in the shape of a home. I told Linda I wanted everything done quickly, discreetly, and on my terms. She understood. Within 5 days, she had 3 serious buyers, all of whom offered above asking. I chose the one who offered cash. A single mother with 2 young boys and a clean record of never missing a mortgage payment. Her name was Angela. I liked that. Then I called Mr. Dwyer and instructed him to begin the transfer of assets to the educational fund I'd chosen. "All of it?" he asked. "All of it," I said. "What I haven't spent by the time I go, I want to give to someone who still believes in books." He didn't ask more questions. He just nodded and began preparing the forms. As we worked through the logistics, signatures, filings, notarizations, I could feel something in me hardening, some old softness being paved over for good. This wasn't revenge. This was preservation. I was digging a moat, raising a wall, securing the final perimeter of what I had left. The sale closed quickly. I signed the final paperwork on a Thursday afternoon. It was sunny, oddly bright for October, and I stood outside with Angela and her boys while Linda handed over the keys. I told them the names of the birds that came to the feeder in spring. I showed the boys the notch in the floor where Savannah had tripped and scraped her knee, and then laughed through her tears. Angela listened kindly. Her boys smiled politely. But I knew this house would be theirs now, not just in paperwork, but in memory. That was what I was giving them. Not just walls. A future. The next day, I began moving into a small apartment across town. A quiet, clean place near a library and a park, with wide windows and a second-floor view of the trees. I didn't take much. A few boxes, a chair, some clothes, one photo of Marjorie in her Sunday dress. That was enough. I left the rest behind. I wanted Savannah to know that she hadn't just failed to take my house. She had lost it forever. And more than that, she had been written out of every legal, financial, and emotional document connected to me. She would get nothing. Not a penny. Not a frame. Not a trace. When the official notice was served to Savannah and Jace informing them of the sale, the removal of her name from my estate, and the cancellation of any future claims, I waited. Not because I doubted her reaction, but because I needed to see it. It came 3 days later in the form of a visit. This time, she didn't knock. She pounded, hard, loud. I opened the apartment door and found her there, wild-eyed, hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Jace stood behind her, arms crossed, that smug mask of superiority now cracking at the edges. "You had no right," she spat. "That house was our legacy." I didn't raise my voice. "You tried to make it your leverage." "There's a difference." "You're insane," she said. "You're punishing us for trying to help." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting myself from people who tried to destroy me for their own gain." "You were going to die alone in that place," she said. "We were trying to give you purpose, something new, a future. You were trying to get my name off the title before the ink dried," I said. "Let's not pretend this was noble." Jace stepped forward. "You're going to regret this. You think you've won, but all you've done is make sure you die forgotten." I looked at him for a long time. "I already lived through the part where you forgot me. I survived it. This is recovery." Savannah's face crumpled slightly. Her lips trembled, but her eyes remained hard. "I needed you," she said. "When I was younger, when I didn't know who else to turn to." "You still had me," I said, "but you sold me off piece by piece. You gambled with my trust." "And then you raised your hand against me. That slap didn't just hurt my face, Savannah. It ended something." For a long moment, none of us spoke. I thought she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she turned, pulling Jace by the arm. "You're pathetic," she muttered. all alone in your little corner of the world. No one to remember you. I remember me, I said just before the door closed. And that's enough. As I stood in the silence of the apartment, my heart did not race. My hands did not shake. For the first time in months, I felt anchored. Not because I had won, but because I had chosen the terms of my loss, and in doing so, turned it into something else entirely. A reckoning with who I had loved, what I had allowed, and what I was finally ready to let go of. The days after Savannah's final visit passed with a quietness so complete it felt almost sacred. I settled into the apartment with surprising ease. There were no familiar creaks in the floorboards, no echoes of Marjorie's laughter or Savannah's tiny feet running through the hallway, no ghosts at all, just the soft murmur of the radiator in the evening and the distant sound of wind brushing against the trees outside my window. I began each morning with coffee and silence, sometimes reading from the old books I'd brought with me, sometimes just staring out the window at the lives of strangers unfolding below. I was not bitter. That surprised me more than anything. I thought I would feel rage or emptiness. But what I felt, most of all, was clarity. A week after the apartment was furnished, I walked to the library near my building and asked the reference desk if they had any volunteer opportunities. The librarian, a young woman with dyed green hair and a warm smile, told me they were starting a senior reading circle for underprivileged teens. "We could use someone who knows their way around Steinbeck," she said. "I taught English for over 40 years, I replied. "Then you're overqualified," she grinned. I signed up. Every Thursday afternoon now, I sit in a circle with a group of teenagers, most of them quiet, guarded, suspicious of the very idea of poetry, and I read to them. We talk about Holden Caulfield and Lenny Small and why stories matter. I don't tell them about Savannah. I don't tell them that I used to imagine doing this with my own granddaughter, that once I dreamed of passing down my love for language to her like a torch. I simply give them what I know, and they take what they can, and that is enough. One boy named Terrell told me last week, "You make books sound like they mean something." I told him, "They do. So do you." Every month I receive a statement from the scholarship foundation I funded. The money I would have left to Savannah now supports 6 students, 3 young women and 3 young men, from backgrounds not unlike hers, but with none of the insulation or entitlement she carried. One of them wrote me a letter. Her name is Jasmine. She said, "Thank you for believing in someone you've never met. I'll try to make it worth it." I keep her letter on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a bird. Sometimes I wonder if Savannah regrets it. Not the money, not the house, but what she lost. I wonder if she ever lies awake at night and thinks about my hand in hers on those long walks to the playground. I wonder if she remembers the smell of Marjorie's pancakes, or how we used to pretend the living room was a boat and the couch cushions were lifeboats. But then I remind myself, it doesn't matter. Remorse isn't owed. Justice isn't always a courtroom. Sometimes justice is simply the refusal to let betrayal dictate the rest of your life. I do not plan to reach out. I have no desire to reopen that wound. I live simply now, within my means, on my terms. I walk each morning. I read each night. I write letters to no one, just to keep my handwriting sharp. I visit Marjorie's grave on Sundays and tell her things she already knows. That I am tired, that I am still here, that the house is gone, but not the love. That the girl we once held in our arms grew into something neither of us could stop or fix, but that I have found a way to forgive her, quietly, without forgetting. In the end, I was not erased. I was not overrun. I did not let the story end with their version of me. Senile, irrelevant, obsolete. I took it back. I rewrote the final chapters. Not with drama or revenge, but with decisions. with lines drawn in ink, with silence chosen over spectacle. There is power in walking away from the people who expect you to crawl. There is dignity in stillness. My name is Arthur Bledsoe. I am 78 years old. I am not useless. I am not forgotten. I am not defeated. I am still here, and I remember everything.